What's telling, I think, here too is Sunak, for those who don't follow UK politics closely, I mean, he's got his back to the wall politically. He's odds on to lose the next election. Labor's well and truly ahead in the polls. So the fact that he's taking on this fight says to me he's reading that there's community support here for a more rational and sensible climate response. And so I think the days of political leaders thinking all voters want, you know, climate action, regardless of the cost to the economy, regardless of the cost to, say, energy security, I think that's over. I think it's all got to be now seen through the prism of how this might impact individual households. Can we sell it to households? I don't think people have signed up to the green dream anymore.
Well, I think this is the test that's sort of looming large for governments everywhere. There's been this assumption that because people say they want to save the planet, they also want to pay for it or inconvenience themselves. And I think focus groups have always shown that that's not the case. It's consistent that people are prepared to pay a very small amount of money to actually affect change. And if you look at the UK situation, they've been enthusiastic embracers of the net zero. The meeting in Glasgow really galvanised everybody to sort of coalesce and try and get the rest of the world on board. And over the last couple of years, I think they've sat down and they've looked at where they are. They've looked at what's happening in Germany. They're looking at protests in the Netherlands. And politicians survive on public mandate. So there's two routes. One is you give way to public sentiment, and the other is you have an authoritarian bent. And thankfully, Sunak seems to be going down the look, let's concede.
I think this is where, on this issue, Glasgow is where Scott Morrison lost the most bark. I think that's where, I mean, the Labor people are against him anyway. They're not going to vote for him over what they imagined were all these things going on in Canberra regarding women and other things. But I think he lost a lot of skin on the whole issue of net zero and that Glasgow commitment. I think he lost his base on that issue. And now you've got the issue of renewables, which Labor thought would be an absolute winner. I mean, they keep telling everyone renewables are cheap, nothing cheaper than wind and solar. But as it's being rolled out, as these towers are turning up into communities, I mean, you wrote about the marine issues with these offshore wind farms this week in the paper. But as all of this is happening and it's real to people, they're seeing it in their towns and their communities, that support's falling away here in Australia as well.
I think that's really the evidence that's coming to the fore. The public protests to this rollout shouldn't be underestimated. And the problem is, for the government, it's vital that these things happen or there be a plan B. Chris Bowen has shown he's determined not to accept any deviation. Greg Combet has been brought in to really coordinate things and marshal the superannuation funding into it. But it all relies ultimately on public acceptance. And there's no evidence that that is going to be anywhere near as smooth as they would have hoped.